Hello and welcome to the premiere episode of FI Newscast, where we bring you relevant news in the food and beverage industry. Here are some of the top stories from this week that we think are worth a second look. We start off in the earnings world, where Kraft Heinz might certainly be celebrating right now. Their Q4 2022 and year-end results showed strong sales. Organic net sales hit the 10% mark in year-over-year growth, beating Wall Street estimates. CEO Miguel Patricio described the figures as, quote, incredible, and believes this positions them well for 2023. Heineken also had a reason to cheer, reporting a higher than expected profit in 2022, despite raising prices of about 10%. And despite high prices across the industry, Americans are still going strong in their spending, as the U.S. Census Bureau recently revealed that January retail sales jumped 3%, which was the highest monthly growth in 2 years. Retail sales grew in almost every category, including restaurants, which saw a 7.2% rise, and grocery stores, which saw a more modest growth of 0.1%. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports the consumer price index rose by 6.4% on an unadjusted basis in the last 12 months. This is a slight change from the 6.5% figure reported in December. Total food prices rose 10.1% during the same period, with food at home prices rising 11.3% and food away from home prices rising 8.3%. Despite the decline in inflation over the past few months, prices still remain elevated compared to pre-pandemic figures, when inflation was around 2 to 3%. And finally, big gains in the low and no alcohol sector, as the IWSR reports the category surpassed the $11 billion mark in 2022, up from $8 billion in 2018. This includes no and low alcohol beer and cider, wine, spirits, and other ready-to-drink products. The report forecasts a CAGR volume increase of 7% by the year 2026. Improved product taste and production strategy were some of the reasons for the rise. It's interesting to see these figures, especially given Heineken's new announcement of no alcohol beer, as shown in their latest commercial, which you're seeing right now, debuting during Super Bowl 57. And we at FI will definitely be keeping our eyes peeled on this trend in the coming months. And those are your top stories. Now we want to get that industry insider perspective and bring in a special guest, a longtime Food Institute friend and supporter. He is the CEO of DMA, Distribution Marketing Advantage, a Chicago-based privately held supply chain distribution and sales organization that works with many of America's top chain distributors. And he is here to give us his take on current events, as well as give an inside scoop on what is going on in the food service industry. His name is Pat Mulhern. Pat, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Susan, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
We're happy to have you here. So let's get into it. We heard a lot of news at the top of this show that I was talking about, seeing those inflation figures steadily rising, seeing that double-digit growth that we're seeing at large in sales figures. You know, Pat, tell us, what are you seeing on the ground in your industry from your experience?
Yeah, sure. Susan, I think the related to the news you just gave, I think January was a fairly optimistic month in the restaurant business for sure. We're still fighting the issues of inflation, although a little bit of relief in inflation overall. We're just pleased that both retailers and food service operators are getting some growth. So I think in the restaurant sector in particular, January, the food away from home sector has outperformed the retail sector. And I think that even with inflation, the average American wants to go out and eat. So we're really pleased to see that. I think drive-throughs, delivery, kind of starting to wane a little bit, but still super important. Dining in the restaurant is improving. I think, it's almost a challenge to get a reservation on a Friday or Saturday night in January. So I think that bodes well for the rest of the year, barring any major unforeseen changes in the economic climate.
So what advice would you give to restaurateurs right now to keep riding that steadily increasing wave?
Yeah, I think, digital's a must. I think every restaurateur learned in the pandemic that it's possible to get an app loaded for your business, and almost all restaurant operators have done that. And the reason for that, obviously, is food away from home has become food prepared away from home, not necessarily you're going out to eat in a restaurant. So I think the continued embracing of technology, whether you're an independent restaurant owner or you own 1,000 restaurants, it's that digital application that is going to continue to be really, really important. I'd say menuing wisely will be a big strategy for the coming year for everyone, meaning, when poultry is, the poultry markets are favorable, you probably are going to feature more of that as an operator for your guests. And, same goes when, the beef industry is going through turmoil, or most recently eggs, or, breakfast restaurants got to figure out a way to continue to, have the right food cost to operate properly. And especially if these are sustainable increases in commodity pricing. So I'd say the digital app, staying on top of your menu. The biggest thing I think that restaurateurs can do here is take good care of your employees. There are not enough employees in the sector today. Everybody knows that. Treating your employees like family really, sounds like common sense, but more important than ever, I think, is, giving care to your worker. And also managing the menu price. I think operators have learned that it's okay to take menu pricing up, and the consumer understands, to have bartenders, waitresses, dishwashers, cooks, and have them show up every day and do a terrific job preparing food for a guest. The menu price has to reflect that. So I think for operators, having the courage to continue to do that.
A lot of great things that you just mentioned, a lot of things that should be on restaurateurs' checklist to tick off. Pat, talk to us. You have been a CEO of DMA for many years now. You've been in the industry for many years. Let's keep going with your wise words of wisdom to the industry. Tell us, what are some of the top issues that other leaders in the industry should be looking out for, should be thinking about in the coming months?
Yes, it's a great question, Susan. And I'm probably less prepared to give forward advice than I've ever been in my career, because things have changed so quickly over the past couple of years that it's, we're looking out the window, as the Food Institute does, at what's going on next week and what may change here, and how do you stay a half a step ahead? So, kind of almost giving a little bit of history, looking back a couple of years, we started with, the economic destruction and a whole industry being almost closed for a couple of months. For the food industry, that was okay for retailers because it was the only place to get food for a while. So the retailers took off. Food service restaurant owners, food away from home restaurant preparers, hotels, schools even had no food service for a while. So there was a big economic, what do I say? There's a resetting of the economy of the food business, and definitely that affected restaurant operators, and it still does today. I think we're through most of that. So, then I'd say following that, we had the supply chain, kind of 50 years of progress destroyed in a supply chain that was highly efficient in the U.S. And maybe I'd say we're 25% back to being the efficiency level this industry, like a grocery retailer would expect to have their store shelf stocked, and a restaurant operator wants to offer a full menu and never run out of anything that a guest wants. So I'd say we got a long way to go there. The supply chain is going to continue to be really important. I think most operators have embraced the fact that it's going to be a partnership orientation to getting it fixed over time here. There was a short period of time where all our workers were going to go somewhere else and work. They were going to quit the industry. They were going to get better jobs. And some of that happened for sure. We lost a lot of workers, especially in the restaurant industry, and in the distribution industry where I work, the same went. After that, I think you had inflation come roaring in the middle of last year, I'd say, for the last 6 months of last year, and moderating a bit now, which thank goodness for that, because everybody needs it. But things like the ports being broken and ships being, 30 deep at the ports every day, and not being able to unload because there weren't workers on the port docks, and manufacturers trying to survive. That's just a few things that have happened here So all of that is kind of settled down in our industry. We're still fighting the driver shortages. There's not enough warehouse availability across the country. We've got things like to build a building used to be 1.5 years for a distributor. To build a restaurant used to be maybe a 6 to 9 month process for a chain. Those are doubled and tripled because you can't get the right equipment. There's just you can't get the right equipment. You may not have enough workers to open a restaurant. Permitting's gotten slower. Construction materials, construction labor. So I think looking out ahead, we'll get back to more normal where packaging, sustainable packaging becomes important. Your report, you talked a lot about non-alcoholic. That is definitely non-alcoholic beverages creeping into, definitely we see it in retail, but also in food service. The biggest thing, Susan, I would say that that everybody should be mindful of in any sector of the food business is labor. And the labor issues we have are not going away soon. And, the simplest solution is doubling down on taking care of your own workers as part of the family. So, there's a lot to look ahead to. There's optimism, as your report showed. We're resilient, but we're going to have to do it over time. It's not going to, there's no light switch we flip that gets us back to great supply chain, great menus, great workers. It's going to take some time to rebuild all that.
Right. Great insight. Thank you so much, Pat, for that. And now I want to turn to our final question, which is a little bit of a fun one, at least for us at the Food Institute. Pat, you have been a longtime subscriber, a longtime supporter of FI, and FI has been around for quite a long time. You've seen the evolution of this company, over the years. Can you tell us, your observations about how FI has changed?
Yeah, I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, the Food Institute has had an overhaul and become increasingly contemporary. And it's always been a place in the industry, as long as I've known it, probably 30, 40 years even, where you went to the Food Institute for truth. And you went to the Food Institute to get your timely information that you could trust, unbiased, and I think a lot of the food industry ran off of a Food Institute data and Food Institute reporting. And fast forward to what's gone on for you all the last couple of years, what I've noticed about the Food Institute is, the move to digital, the move to getting information to food operators, food manufacturers, food retailers, the entire food structure in a timely manner and quick. So, to me, the Food Institute is a daily must. I get my Food Institute briefing every single morning. I read it every morning. There's rarely something in that you rarely miss a big story. And, for any CEO or any executive that's managing people, managing a business, there's no better read. And then the move to digital, doing a live foodcast, I congratulate you on that. Someday, and hopefully it's soon that, we have a food a news reporting service that does this weekly or daily. And I think you guys are the right ones to do it. So I've watched the transformation, and it's been amazing.
Well, kind words. And again, more great insights from you, Pat. Thank you so much. You've been such a longtime supporter of FI, and, it's always been great, having you as, a beacon of great wisdom and great commentary. So this is CEO Pat Mulhern, head of DMA Distribution Marketing Advantage. And you can find out more about this great company by going to their website, www.dmadelivers.com. Pat, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Susan. Congratulations to you guys on the great work you're doing.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to dive into one of the hottest trends in the food industry right now, cell-cultured meat. Stay with us. Turning now to our FI team member insights this week regarding cell-cultured seafood, FI reporter and producer 𝗏𝗏𝗏 met with 𝗏𝗏𝘁 Foods co-founders 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝘂𝗃 and 𝗂𝗏𝗏 𝘂𝗏𝗵 to give us an overview of the cell-cultured industry. Take a look.
So for a lot of our readership and viewership who don't really know too much about cell-cultured technology, could you give me kind of a high-level overview of the process?
We're feeding the cells the same nutrients that they would have within the fish, things like sugars and fats and minerals. But the thing is, when cells grow, they need guidance in terms of how they're going to organize into things like muscle and fat. So we provide them with a structure, and it's basically a plant-based structure. We call it a scaffold, and that gives the cells the right sort of forms and structures to grow within. And we essentially create a nutritionally similar cut of salmon, but just grow that outside the animal.
Tell me a little bit about the total chief reasons for the movement that you decided, hey, I'm going to pursue cell-based technology.
There are a few things that are driving this. One is, for seafood, there's a big reason to innovate, right? So it's this interesting paradox of, on one hand, we're being told by our doctors to eat a lot less red meat and a lot more seafood. But there's this asterisk, which is, but don't eat too much because you'll mercury poison yourself, or you'll expose yourself to antibiotics for farmed fish, or you'll put arsenic and microplastics in your body, right? And so on one hand, we have this super nutritious food that we need to eat with, in some cases, a supply that's really under strain and significantly increasing demand. So we saw this as an opportunity to create, not something that will certainly replace existing forms of seafood, but really add to it or supplement it.
So what steps kind of go into the FDA approval process, and how soon can we expect your product or maybe a similar product to start, becoming more widely available commercially?
Yeah, maybe the first aspect of that is it's not a set out approval process. I think when we began our conversations with FDA, we imagined that maybe there was a checklist for us to fill out, and that's not the case at all. It really was a back and forth. It was a conversation around what are the inputs, what are the things that that go into this process that are different from existing structures or frameworks for creating food.
So that's where you'll begin to find these kinds of products, is in initially restaurants, and then maybe some sushi kiosks in the grocery store, and then eventually maybe you can go on the 𝗏𝗏𝘁 website and order our product directly from us, or find it at your local grocery store.
How would you respond to kind of the skepticism or questions around this technology?
Anytime there's a new method for making even familiar foods, it's worth having some skepticism. I think that's natural and healthy in a lot of ways. That's our perspective, is that while it seems a little bit crazy, it is actually just the same things that are already in our food supply, just kind of combined in a unique way. And so, we've shown that through many reams of data that we've shared with the FDA, like 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝘂𝗏 was saying, in terms of safety and comparing that to how that stacks up against conventional seafood. And because we make this in such a controlled environment, it is really, truly, the cleanest and probably safest seafood that you'll be able to buy. It's just going to take a little bit of time, right? So people can go out to restaurants, try it. It's actually not that weird. Months and years will go by, and this will become a little bit more normal.
What have been some of your greatest successes and challenges along the way?
I'll on the success front, I'll just come back to that example I was just giving about this partnership we had with the Conservation Fund. In a way, from the outside, it might seem like a little bit of a surprising alliance that a company like 𝗏𝗏𝘁 that's creating an alternative, or at least a new source of seafood, would be interested in helping to make sure that the conventional seafood industry remains healthy, right? Yet we don't really see it as two separate things, right? Like, our goal is to have, like 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝘂𝗏 was saying, the cleanest, most sustainable seafood available for everybody to enjoy.
I can take the challenge part, which I think is that of time. And the question is, as this planet warms up and fewer and fewer fish are found in the oceans year after year, can we do it in time to have a meaningful impact? I think at least when we as a team think about the urgency behind that, that is the most galvanizing sort of fact, or what we're sort of working against here. It's not so much that can we someday in the future create salmon that is just as good and far cheaper than conventional salmon? Of course. But the question is, how long will it take us to get there? And is that amount of time, we're going to be able to do it in a short enough period of time to have a meaningful impact?
Before we go, let's take a look at what's coming up in the food world. On Tuesday, February 21st at 7:10 a.m. Eastern Time, Walmart will release its Q4 2023 earnings report. Thursday, February 23rd at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, we will see the GDP release of the fourth quarter and second estimate for 2022 by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And finally, on Friday, February 24th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, the University of Michigan will release its latest consumer sentiment numbers. You don't want to miss those events. And that wraps up the very first episode of the FI Newscast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place, and never forget to check out all the great content we offer at www.foodinstitute.com. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you soon.